and whatever it is that they're going through that you went through, then that is a purpose within itself. And so that's what's so beautiful about it, is that there's a lot of pain and grief. There's a lot of pain and grief, but inside of that pain is a lot of purpose and a new identity that you get to be whoever you want to be. And that's what is so beautiful about it.
Welcome back to the Express Yourself Black Man podcast. My name is Kizzle, or Kofi, and I'm a mental health advocate, public speaker, and founder of a Kizzle brand, which is a project aimed at raising awareness for depression and helping people through difficult times. Studies show that on average, men lose 2.8 years of their life when they're under heavy stress. The point of this podcast is for me to gain those 2.8 years back. As a Black man, society often tries to tell me what I can't do, or talk about, which can often leave me feeling trapped. And so this podcast is my release. All right, so we're here with Loryn Denise. She is a grief and mental health advocate, a grief educator, and a podcaster. Loryn, how are you doing today?
I am doing phenomenal. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Yeah, I just got back from the gym, so I'm feeling the endorphins. So
okay,
that's flowing right now. Yeah, so we connected through Instagram, like most of my connections through Instagram. And you had an interesting platform because I never met someone that specifically focuses on grief.
Yeah.
Right. So please tell me, how did you get into grief work, grief education, and also, I guess, grief? I would call it advocacy, honestly.
Yeah, for sure. No, that's the proper word.
Right.
Definitely advocating for grief, because nobody who's out here like grief.
Right.
You know what I mean? So, to kind of understand how I got into work is to understand the story, right? So back in 2015, my mom was battling breast cancer, and, I say won the battle, so I lost my mom to breast cancer in 2015. And then fast forward to 2019, I lost my dad to bladder cancer. And so I got acquainted with grief really quickly, right? Especially coming up with the holidays. And I recognized quickly that I didn't know what really grief was and how to process it. And when I was looking for those resources, I had to go to therapy because, of course, I have a lot of self-awareness and understanding that I couldn't do it on my own. Once I started recognizing different things that were happening, lashing out, dark moments, all of those things, right? And so as I was in therapy and as I was doing my research on grief, I recognized that there was not a lot of resources just on grief as a whole. There was a lot of resources, of course, on losing somebody, right? But there wasn't a lot of resources as grief as a whole.
Right.
And then when I'm looking at these resources, no one looked like me, nobody sounded like me, and nobody was around my age talking about grief and like just the journey of it. Because of course, we always focus on like the sadness and the anxiety and, all of those other sad things, but nobody was really focusing on that beautiful journey of it and really talking about it from a sense of like, what really is grief? Like, what happens when you lose a job and that feeling that happens? Like, what happens when you lose a friend and that feeling happens? What happens when the pandemic happens and you're stuck in the house? Like, what are all those feelings? And they all come back to grief, right? And so nobody talks about that. Nobody talks about that journey. Nobody talks about really how beautiful it can be and the lessons that you can learn from it. And so, that's kind of how I got into the work. I knew I wanted to do something with grief. I thought I was going to be doing grief with events because I have a background in events. And, God is funny. He's like, nope, you're going to do a podcast. And so, I always tell people, he woke me up at 3:30 in the morning, had me, write down all these ideas. And a month later, launched it and been out here, doing that grief work and just making people not feel alone ever since. Right. And just advocating for those who don't know what they're feeling or know how they're feeling, to give them a safe space to be able to communicate that. So that's how I got into this field.
I love it. I love this story. And when we were talking about, normally people have a question about, what do you tell someone when they lose someone, right? Like, what am I supposed to say? How do you normally handle that?
Yeah, it's so funny because people don't know what to say, right? So they're always like, okay, I'm not going to say anything. Or I'm sorry for your loss. And then they're like, well, what do I say after that? Right. Sometimes it's best to not say anything. I think a lot of times what's the most important things that I remember, and a lot of people who I talk to, you know, in their kind of heavy part of their grieving journey, what's most important to people is being there. Like people remember you, like what you do rather than what you say. And so, you know, we struggle as people, like, okay, what do I say? I don't want to say this because I don't want to set them off, or I don't want to say this to make them mad. And in order to kind of like get around that, just be there, right? And I know a lot of times when you're grieving, you don't know what you need. And so as a person who's supporting a griever, I just try and show up in any way that I can see, right? Like being real. Like, okay, they haven't eaten in a few days. Maybe let me go to the grocery store and get them something, right? Or, you know, they've been in the house for a while. Like, let me see, maybe if I can go over there. Maybe, hey, I want to take you to lunch and support you in your grieving journey and give you another space to talk about it, right? Just to give them another space to get out the house, right? Like just being observant in that sense. And so you don't have to focus so much on what you say. Because, you know, for me, just the one thing that I always say is, how can I support you in your grieving journey? Like, you know, not what do you need? Tell me what you need, because a lot of times you don't know what you need. So how can I support you? And if they're like, I don't know, just be observant and watch, because you being observant and watching, they'll tell you what you need, or excuse me, what they need, instead of like telling you what they need. Right. So,
right. Yeah. There's a lot that you can learn from people by just watching them.
Exactly.
Right? Like, I think we don't understand that we can just, like you said, just watch what someone's doing, how they're behaving, and then decide what we want to do and how we want to show up.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's more so about what you do than what you say in those moments. Honestly.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Okay. And I remember you were saying how you used this really good analogy for what grief actually is. Do you remember?
Oh, the car of life analogy.
Yes, please put us on. Tell us.
Yeah. Yes. I always tell people, like, I think about grief in your car. So life is this car, right? So you're driving down the road, you're in the car, you're living your life, right? And here comes grief in the passenger seat. Because the thing about grief is it's a lifelong journey. It doesn't matter if it happened 10 years ago, it doesn't happen 2 days ago. It's a lifelong journey. And so you're in this driver's seat, you know, you're driving down the road of life, and here comes grief in the passenger seat. Grief is going to like mess with your GPS. It's going to turn on your radio, turn off your radio, turn off the air, do all these things, try and take the wheel, right? Try and do all these distractions in life. But as long as you don't allow it to get in the driver's seat and drive you off the road or whatever your path is in life, then you're good to go, because you're going to learn how to drive straight with these distractions that grief is going to throw. Because sometimes it's going to come in there and change the radio. Sometimes it's going to come in there and change the GPS. Sometimes it's going to come in there and change the temperature. But as long as you're still driving, as long as you're still in control, it doesn't matter what grief does. You let it come, do what it does, but you're still in control, and you still get to decide where you want to go on that road of life, even though grief is going to be here riding with you on the passenger seat regardless.
That is so, man. And you just broke it down so beautifully, man. Yeah. Like I hope people are listening. I really do. Yeah, I hope people are listening, because that is such a great analogy. I remember when you told me that, I went and told somebody else that. I was like, yo, because it just made a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Right. Because a lot of times, like, I haven't really had to deal with someone close to me, like losing someone super close to me. So I get super anxious when it comes to like thinking of that.
Yeah.
Like just thinking of grief. But the way that you broke it down, it gives me just a little, it helps me to calm myself down a little bit when it comes to that. Good, because I know that, okay, it's going to be something I have to experience, and it's going to be something that I get through. And as long as, like you said, I don't let it take over my life, basically, I'm good. I'm good.
All G-O-O-D.
Yes. So what do you tell people that are dealing with grief as far as like how to deal with it healthily? What are some things that you tell people, or what are some things that you did that you feel like were healthiest in terms of dealing with grief?
Yeah. So number one, I'm an advocate for therapy. Even if you're not grieving, I'm just an advocate for therapy, because again, in society as just as a whole, we're not taught a lot about grief, right? We don't have the conversation about it. It's not a dinner time topic. Like, so tell me what you're grieving today. Like, that's not the topic of conversation. And so, you know, you need someone who can kind of navigate you and those feelings that you're holding on to, because, you know, a lot of people are like, I think I have anxiety, or I think this is what this is, instead of like, you know, trying to have to think of what it is or understanding what it is, having a professional kind of help you break that down and navigate. Oh my God, life-changing. So I always advocate therapy if it's something that you're open to, right? I tell people, you know, really lean into that support network. And your support network can be one person, your support network can be 10 people, it could be 50 people, right? Lean into like that close-knit circle of friends or family who you can lean into and say, hey, you know what, today I'm not really feeling good. Or today I feel happy, but I feel guilty about being happy, right? Like, you know, like lean into them and allow them to, even in those moments of anxiousness, sometimes I call my friends, I'm like, yeah, like I'm really like feeling this way. And they're like, okay, well, let's talk about it. And they'll bring the point of like, a lot of times when you're anxious, if somebody you back down to reality, you're like, okay, well, yeah, you're right. Like that really did make sense, you know, but I kind of got overwhelmed in the moment, right? So really, really lean into that support network. If you know, subscribe to whatever your religion is, pray to a tree, whoever, definitely tap in with the higher source. You know, I always tell people, I know it's hard because I didn't really do that for a while when I was like in my heavy part of grief, because I didn't really have anything to say. You know, I wasn't mad at God or anything, but I was like, what do you want me to say? Like,
right.
Both my parents are gone. What are we discussing? Right.
Right.
But I knew that he was there, and I knew that there were moments when I was kind of in those dark places that I couldn't reach out, or I couldn't do, like he kind of pulled me out of that. Right. So like really tapping into the source. And, you know, the biggest thing is really just letting yourself feel, letting yourself process those emotions. Because I think a lot of times I'll say we as just people, in general, we don't allow ourselves to feel because we don't want whatever is that feeling is associated with. We don't want it. So like if you feel sad, like a lot of times you go and like cope with the grief. You don't manage it, you cope with it. So you'll go and drink, you'll go and smoke, you'll go have sex, you'll go do drugs, like you'll go do whatever, right? Because you're trying to cope with it and get rid of it instead of managing it. And managing it is allowing that moment of grief in, saying like, okay, like I see you. I see you, like you're in car. I see you trying to change that GPS. I see you. Come on, change it for a little bit. Right. And then allowing that feeling to happen, and then allowing yourself to get, you know, I had a therapist on my show, Dr. Kurt, amazing. He was like, allow yourself to feel just good enough. You don't have to feel amazing and great, just feel good enough. And then, you know, be able to move forward. So allow yourself to feel however you need to feel and be unapologetic about it, right? Because a lot of times, you know, there's a lot of disenfranchised grief, which I know we'll get into, that doesn't allow you to do that. So really, really give yourself the space to feel and to process that.
Absolutely. So beautifully said. And we might as well just segue right into the disenfranchised grief, because that was going to be my next question. So what is disenfranchised grief? Please break it down for the people that are hearing that for the first time.
Yeah, so disenfranchised grief is what a lot of people experience on a daily basis. And that is basically a grief that society says that is ungrievable or is deemed not grievable. So like, for example, you have an abortion. You can't grieve that abortion because you did it yourself. Right. Or someone committing suicide. Well, they took their life, so you shouldn't grieve that. Right. Or, you know, a ex who was a toxic ex, you know, from 10 years ago passed away, and you feel some type of way and you're grieving that, right? Like that's a miscarriage can be deemed as disenfranchised grief, right? Because society's like, well, you can just have another baby, it's fine, right? So these are examples of what disenfranchised grief are. And a lot of people experience disenfranchised grief because, again, society, or whether big society or I say small society, your circle doesn't deem whatever it is that you're going through, your loss that you've experienced, grievable. And so a lot of people, that's what happens, is they suppress those emotions and they cope with their grief for years and don't recognize it as grief because, again, it's disenfranchised from what society says is grief.
And, you know, I think I've experienced that too with a friend, and the friend didn't pass away or anything like that. It's just, we had a falling out and I had to learn how to grieve the friendship. Yeah. And I remember talking to my therapist about it. I was like, yo, I keep on thinking about things that he said or things that he did, and it's bothering me because it's like, why do I keep thinking about this? And she's like, you know, y'all were friends for this, so and so, you know, it's okay for you to still think about things and still be a little bit bothered by it. And I was just like, dang, you're right. But I didn't feel like I was able to, I didn't feel like I should be able to do that. Yeah. You know, like I felt like, okay, we fell out. I should never have to worry about it again. I'm good. I should just move forward. But that's not how we work as human beings. We form a connection. When that connection is broken, we still yearn for that connection in some way, shape, or form. And there's nothing
Correct.
wrong with that, right?
Yeah.
Wow. So yeah, I think a lot of us experience that disenfranchised grief just because as
For
a
sure.
society, we don't allow ourselves to really feel when we're going through all the different things that we go through in life that bring about grief.
Correct. Because it's like big loss, little loss. So like your friendship, they would try and put in the little loss category. As opposed to my parents would be in the big loss category, right?
Right.
So it's okay that I can grieve this, but right here, like, it's fine. You can get
come on. Yeah.
Friend.
Yeah. That's just a friend.
Mm-hmm.
Right. He didn't even die.
Right.
Like what you grieve
right.
But
losing a friend is like a death.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a death. It really is, because you've been friends for a long time. And so like you said, those connections and those moments and those feelings, you're like, this is weird.
Yeah, right. And especially as a Black man, right? Because it's like,
exactly.
It's like, damn, bro, you really tripping over a friend that's a guy, right? Like, so it makes you feel like, you know what? I don't even want to talk about this to anybody because nobody's gonna really get it, and then you just suppress it even more, and now you upset at people that's bringing up the person and all this extra stuff when you could have just dealt with it.
Yep.
Straightforwardly, right? Like, and just allowed yourself to process what you were going through. That's man. Right. Yeah. So I had to really just learn how to process that and just not beat myself up for feeling bad about it.
Yep. Exactly.
Because I have guys that hit me up sometimes too. They're like, yo, I'm just getting out of this toxic relationship and I know I shouldn't love her anymore, but I still love her. I'm like, bro, it's not about you not loving her anymore. Right. Like, yo, we human beings, bro. Like, it's
right. You have feelings.
Right. You
was with this person, toxic or not.
Right. You was with this person. It's okay to have love for them. And I tell people all the time too, like, yo, my ex cheated on me. That doesn't mean that I don't have love for her. I just don't want to be with her.
Correct.
I wish her the best, right? But I don't want to be with her. It doesn't mean that I don't have love for her. And I think we need to be able to separate those things. Just because somebody did you wrong doesn't mean that you should be able to dead everything. Like, that's not how it goes.
Right.
That's not how it goes.
Like, when I see you in person, I'm not gonna.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Oh my God. So what do you normally tell people when they say I shouldn't feel this way? Like, what is your response to that?
I'm always like, why? Why shouldn't you? Who came up with the idea that you shouldn't feel a certain type of way, right? I know society, you know what I mean? It's like, but why? Like if somebody's like, I feel guilty. Again, back to the point of like, I feel guilty that I'm happy today because, my dad passed away.
Right.
Why do you feel that way, Loryn? Or why do you feel that way? Like, what is the reason why you feel that way? So I always ask why, like, because I want to know where you got that idea from, because like, that's what we need to tackle. Did that idea come from a family member? Did that idea come from a friend group? Did that idea come from social media? Because, you should bounce back, you know what I mean? According to social media, like, where did that idea come from? And once we figure out where that idea came from, well, why do you think that they gave that to you? Why do you think that spilled over to you? Okay, cool. Great. So now that we know why you have it, now that we know why you think it spilled to you, again, my question is, why do you think it's not okay? It is okay. It's okay. The only reason you thought it wasn't okay is because you learned that. And so now it goes back to unlearning that again, toxic is the word, but that toxic behavior or that unhealthy behavior of that it's not okay to feel bad, that it's not okay to, talk to people about your sadness, that it's not okay to be anxious. Like all of those things are okay. Right. Because you said it's okay. However you feel is valid. No one says anything about it or not. Whatever you feel in your moment of grief is valid. So if you feel happy, that's valid. If you feel sad, that's valid. If you feel mad, that's valid. If you feel anxious, that's valid. Nobody needs to validate that but you. It doesn't matter what anybody else says. So that's what I always say. I'm like, why? And then, we have to get to the root of why they really do feel that way.
And, it reminds me of just therapy in general, because in therapy, like I remember my therapist telling me, like, you're a master of yourself. I'm here to guide you along your healing journey, but ultimately you are the master of yourself. So you ultimately know how you feel, regardless of what it is that I'm saying. You know what's best for you. You know how you feel. And instinctually we do, right? So when people say, I shouldn't feel this way, what you're saying is my instincts are wrong, and our instincts are rarely ever wrong. So you got to be able to tune into yourself. Man, that is so powerful. Honestly, I love the fact that you ask them why.
Yeah.
Because it really gets you to the root. It gets you to the root
Yeah.
quickly. Like, where did that come from? Honestly.
Yeah.
Wow. So
Therapy
early,
boy.
Yeah. Oh man, listen.
Therapy boy.
Honestly, I try to tell people, man. I try to tell people all the time. I'm a completely different person because of therapy.
Whole person.
Yeah.
Whole different person.
So earlier you talked about the beauty of grief, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I know there's a lot of people that are probably like, what in the world? The beauty of grief. Right. What does that mean? Right. So Can you please break it down? What is the beauty of grief? What do you think that is?
Yeah. You know, what's funny is people they're like, girl, what? Mm-hmm. But again, because society has trained us to think of grief as just this sad, horrible, terrible thing, mm-hmm. which it is those things. Mm-hmm. But when I talk about the beauty of grief, I'm talking about what I love about grief is that grief is the only time in your life where you're able to create a new identity and nobody's going to check you about it. Mm-hmm. Right. So when my parents died, again, therapy, I'm a whole new person. Mm-hmm. You know, I've always had like a serving spirit and things like that, but like certain things that I do now and certain boundaries that I have in place and certain, you know, just being a different Loryn, nobody checked me on it. Right. Because it's like, oh, she lost her parents. So because you have a loss, right? So you have a loss of a friend. Mm-hmm. You're no longer the same person after that loss because that's no longer your normal. Right. So you automatically have to become this new person because now you have to adjust to whatever your new normal is outside of your friend who's been there for a while. Right. I automatically have to adjust to who Loryn is outside of my parents. Whoever's listening has to automatically adjust to losing their job during the pandemic, to losing a dog, to losing a relationship, to losing whatever your loss is, right? Mm-hmm. That is the beautiful thing, is that you can create whoever you want to be after that loss and nobody's going to check you. You can be 50 years old and be a whole new person and nobody's going to check you about it, right? You can be 20 years old and had no idea who you were and try to find your purpose. You endured some type of loss and now you found this purpose inside the pain. And so now you become this whole new person, right? Mm-hmm. And that's what happens a lot of times too, is within that grief, when I talk about is beautiful, is that you find the purpose inside whatever that pain is. Mm-hmm. And, you know, it could be, you know, obviously for us, like, you know, we use our platforms to be able to help others and, you know, their mental health journey, or mm-hmm. you can use it to use some other form of art, right? Like, well, whatever your purpose is inside of that pain, you're always going to find it if you go looking for it. And I wholeheartedly believe that because I've seen it happen time and time and time again. And if it's even just helping one person and mm-hmm. whatever it is that they're going through that you went through, mm-hmm. then that is a purpose within itself. And so that's what's so beautiful about it, is that there's a lot of pain and grief. There's a lot of pain and grief, but inside of that pain is a lot of purpose and a new identity that you get to be whoever you want to be. And that's what is so beautiful about it.
Man, beautifully said. Honestly, I have nothing else to add to that. I really don't have anything else to add to that. So beautifully said. Wow. I hope you guys are listening. I hope you guys are getting something from this. Loryn, please plug in your podcast, your social media website, if you have one, wherever people can find you, how they can support, let people know what you're doing.
Yeah, all the things. So you can follow me on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. They're all the same. It's at This Too Shall Suck Podcast. That's with 2 O's. You can find me there. Or if you want to follow my personal page, I talk a lot just about podcasting in general. That's at Loryn Denise. You can also go to my website at www.thistooshallsuckpodcast.com, learn more about me. And also, if you want to get into podcasting, I created a profitable podcast playbook that shows you how to do that. All you have to do is go to profitablepodcastplaybook.com and you'll get that absolutely for free. So yeah, I've responded to DMs and emails and all that. So please send me a message. I love talking to you guys.
Yes, Loryn, thank you so much. I appreciate you. I appreciate your spirit and all the gems that you've dropped.
No, thank you for having me. This is great. And shout out to you for having this platform. Like, honestly, shout out to you as a Black man. Like, my heart, mm-hmm. It brings me so much joy. You have no idea. So keep doing God's work, because He's going to keep blessing you. Okay.
Absolutely. And you too. I appreciate the words. Thank you for taking the time out to listen to this episode. I truly, truly, truly appreciate you. So I really hope you got some valuable insight. And I hope I helped in some capacity, whether it be through the platform or the podcast. If you like to support for free, you can like this video if you're on YouTube, or you can share and subscribe regardless of what platform you're listening to the episode on. If you like to support monetarily, now we talking, you can go to shop.expressyourselfblackman.com and get yourself some merch. We have a hoodie, we have sweatsuits, we have shirts, we have hats. We also have an ebook on how to heal, where I discuss breakups, depression and suicidal ideations, anxiety, and attachment styles. I go in depth about my story with dealing with all of those things, and then I explain how to heal in an easy guide. It's easy to follow. It's easy to go from reading to implementing. So if you're interested in that as well, it's in the shop. The book is called From Hurting to Healing, A Black Man's Guide to Feeling. So consider supporting monetarily, but regardless of how you support, I appreciate you. I hope you have a great day.
Sometimes I know you feel like you ain't got nobody to speak to. A shoulder to lean on somebody you could preach to. No, you need to hear it, my brother, I love you. We got way too much to live for. We got way too much to live for. When we get it all, we want
Looks like you
more.
lost another one.
When we get it, still we want more. I know it's hard, but you just gotta push on through. Only Brody always tryna bring you. If you ever feeling down, bro, you're never alone. If you ever feeling down, you can always hit my phone. If you ever feeling down, bro, you're never alone. Okay, hey, I'm your shoulder to lean on. Express yourself, de-stress yourself. I don't wanna talk about me, tell me how you feeling well. Since you know that you alive, but this earth feeling